Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. Good morning, Rami and Jessica. Good to see you as always. And our guest today, I'm excited to visit with Astral Meadow. And I'm going to read her bio here. I'm sure you'll love to hear about her. Astral Meadow is an astrologer, Akashic Records consultant, mixed media artist, and the host of the Astral Hour podcast. For this episode, we'll be doing a deep dive into the etheric and astral bodies and how they correspond to our physical bodies. And so this description, as well as all her links to her website and social media and YouTube podcast are down below. And so great. I was just saying before we started how wonderful my favorite thing is about having the podcast is that I get to meet so many great new people, and it's fun because we can all inspire and encourage and learn from each other, and it's awesome. Collaboration, that's
Yeah.
the word of the year, I think. So
Yes.
Astral, I would love for you to tell us, please, some of your story, how you got into the work that you're doing now, and your passion for that.
All right. Well, I have always been a very spiritual person. I consider my first spiritual initiation to be my birth. So I was born into hardship, and I suffered quite a bit as a younger child. And I attribute some of these challenges to kind of awakening to some of my spiritual gifts. Meeting and contacting my spiritual guides, which actually showed up to help me make it through some really hard times. And I always just assumed that they were my little angels, but I don't know if I would have had such a close relationship to them had I not been in need. And so, yeah, I think it kind of primed me to have a connection to God and spirit, because it was like the one thing that was helping me get through. I started being able to have lucid dreams and astral project when I was about 4 or 5 years old. I kind of assumed that everyone had this ability. But I also used this astral projection when I was going through some of the harder experiences too, because I would be able to sort of dissociate, leave my body, and not have to experience some of the pain. So all of these things, I was basically taking these spiritual initiations without a guru and just having to go through them. And my spiritual guides are the only assistants that I have. But looking back, I see how important this was to my journey. And I can look in my natal chart and see, as having Saturn as my chart ruler, I was born in the Sadi transit, which is Saturn conjunct my moon. So all of these challenges are actually a part of how I was going to awaken to my spiritual gifts and move through, and eventually, embody like a healer and a teacher as I grow older and have to go through all the healing that came with it. So, yeah, as I grew, I wanted to kind of investigate, like, what are these experiences that I was having? I had some remote viewing where I witnessed some things happening in present time as a young child. And so I was very interested in, like, okay, what was that? How did I know that was happening even though I was asleep? What am I doing when I'm leaving my body? How am I able to have all of these visions? How am I able to see things other people are not able to see? So I just started reading all of these books. I was reading like Greg Braden and Caroline Mice books at like 15, trying to figure out some kind of answers. I started listening to Coast really young, because my English teacher would be a guest on there sometimes. And that's where I really got introduced into metaphysics and was like, I want to do this when I grow up. I want to interview and meet all these interesting people and share all these stories, because hearing other people share their stories made me feel more grounded in some of my experiences. And like, this isn't that weird. It's not that odd. There's other people that, you know, are having very similar things. So, yeah, I was in my records last night because I woke up. I couldn't sleep very well. I was a little anxious. And I was going to lead into what inspired me to do this deep dive into the etheric double and the astral body and all this. And I had this different story I was going to tell. And I went into my records and they showed me a vision of an experience that I had as a child. And I was like, okay, well, I'll start there. So when I was really young, and I had these experiences many times, so I remember the first time I looked up at the sky and it was a beautiful day, a blue backdrop, and I saw these little particles dancing around. And I remember being a kid and saying, what am I seeing? And everybody was like, those are floaters. They don't mean anything. So, but they really stood out to me. And I had seen James and the Giant Peach. So it made me think of the little glowworms from that story. And I would notice them all the time. I would notice them more when the sun was out. They would move faster and they would glow brighter. And then in the evening, I would notice them, but they would move slower. And I would have to really like unfocus my eyes to see them. And I've had floaters, and they're a little bit different because when you move, the floater moves with you. These are just everywhere in the air. So that is actually when my investigation started on this, and I carried that memory with me. And one day I was reading, I think it was in The Secret Doctrine by Helena Blavatsky, and she had a word for these things, and they were called vitality globules. And I was like, what the heck? They're like, someone's talking about these and they're not just calling them eye floaters. And so that's when I was first introduced to there's a word. Okay. And I kind of sat with a little bit of her research and then moved on. And one day I decided to Google vitality globule. And this book, The Etheric Double, by A.E. Powell, came up in the search bar. And I bought it, and it had this full description on what the vitality globules are and how they interact with our physical body and our etheric body, and interconnect with our whole human constitution. So that's actually what started this study and fascination with learning more about the etheric body. So
Interesting. Yeah. So, could you describe the vitality globules a little more? So
right.
I could, I'm not
Okay.
picturing them yet. I'm trying to see if I've done that, had that or not in
Okay.
comparison.
So what they basically are, and there's a whole book on occult chemistry that people can read to go into even more detail on this, is there are atoms that are just floating around. And when the sun is out, the sun is distributing prana, or life force energy, and it's entering into the atoms. And this causes them to hold light and sort of glow. They carry all of the rays, all the different colors. And these vitality globules enter our field through the splenic center chakra. And that chakra moves and spins and distributes the colors that correspond to each energy center and vitalizes the etheric body that way. We also take in vitality through like breath work, the foods that we eat. I also, in my study of homeopathy, am starting to really consider that the remedies are also working with the vital force. And that's the whole concept of homeopathy is healing the derangement in the vital force. So I think when we're taking these remedies, we're also playing with that energy and like flower essences and Reiki. And so there's different ways to get the vitality in the body and to move it around. So I think maybe your biofield tuning is also working in that similar way of helping work the kinks out of any of the blockages that can happen over time with the vital force from things like trauma or really severe injury, or, you know, sometimes it's carried over from a past life. So yeah, there's all these beautiful modalities that help us work on the vital force, which is associated
Yeah.
with this etheric body.
Can you give a description for myself and maybe others listening who don't know the specifics of what the etheric body is? I think of, I mean, and when you first started saying it, I was like, oh, like our spirit, our soul, is that, or how would it be described?
Okay.
The word. Sorry, I hope I'm
No,
embarrassing myself.
I'm
in
hoping
knowing.
that you would ask this question.
Okay, good.
I'm glad
Okay.
you did too, Jessica.
Yeah. So the etheric body is one of 7 bodies that we possess that make up the human constitution. Everything in our universe has a 7-fold connection. So the etheric body is the second. The first is the physical, and then the etheric body is the bridge between the physical body and the astral body. And then we have the astral body is the bridge between the etheric and the mental body, and then it continues to go up, which I won't go into all of the 7, but everything contains all that the whole contains. So we separate them to study them, but at the end of the day, it's all one. So it's hard to separate, the astral body from the etheric double from the physical body because they interpenetrate. And I have this quote on the principle of interpenetration that I was going to read to kind of explain that more. But it really comes into, as above, so below. And we are kind of just all interconnected as one. So the principle of interpenetration makes it clear that the different realms of nature are not separated in space, but exist about us here and now, so that to perceive and investigate them, no movement of space is necessary, but only an opening within ourselves of the senses of which they can be perceived. So in order to connect with any of these 7 bodies that we possess, we all only have to tune in and go within ourselves to be able to connect with them. So the soul is kind of the whole collection of all 7. And the etheric is specifically associated with our vitality sheath, sometimes called the pranamaya kosha in the Vedic literature. And it kind of like helps us maintain homeostasis. It helps us maintain our physical health. It is an exact duplicate of our physical body, and it extends just a little bit further out. And then we have the health aura, which goes around, and this is what people photograph. And it is basically the etheric double that they're photographing.
Okay.
And it matters, a lot how we're treating our physical body because they correspond. So if we're eating really bad food and we're putting awful thoughts into our minds and we're just not taking care of ourselves, then our etheric body will not be functioning at ultimate capacity. So this is where you want to kind of honor all the aspects of yourself to be a truly functioning, healthy human being. So yeah, its main thing is it helps us stay healthy, maintain sort of a homeostasis. It moves vital magnetic energies through the body. It absorbs the prana and vitality, and then it bridges our physical body to the higher spheres. Okay, so it's not always just the astral body. It's actually how we connect to all of the beyond, because without that bridge, we can't have access to the higher parts of ourselves. So yeah.
Thank you. Explaining.
So then go on to the explaining a little bit about all of the 7, just a little bit more. What I'm trying to see, I haven't studied this before. But I know that in the biofield, it seems in the work I do, it seems like I'm working in all of those, right?
Yes.
Because I'm definitely working in spirit, giving and
Right.
receiving, but yet we're encountering emotions at certain dates of time in the person's record that's in
Right.
their aura or their biofield, right? From conception and gestation at birth at the outer edge to current day at the body, right? But then fairly often in my work, then I encounter what I would call sonic soul retrieval, bits of consciousness from different ages that are stuck in time. And so that's like a different section, right?
Right.
Of what you're talking about. So
Right.
it's just interesting to me to compare all those to what I do.
Yeah, you're absolutely, because of the principle of interpenetration, you are working on all of them, and it's like the thing that needs to be healed will be what comes forward.
Yes, absolutely.
So the 7 are the physical, sometimes called the stula sarira. The second is the etheric double, and then the third would be the astral body, or the linga sarira in Sanskrit. The fourth is the lower mental plane, and then it kind of bridges into the higher mental plane, which is associated with the causal body. So the lower 4 are mortal, and they will disintegrate over time. Like our physical body dies, and slowly the etheric double will start to disintegrate. It doesn't really leave the physical body. It doesn't really go very far away from it. Over time, it will disintegrate, but sometimes it will hover over the physical body, which is where you get like churchyard ghosts and things like that. It will disintegrate, and then the astral body will slowly disintegrate. But as we start to move up into the mental plane and we get to the higher mind, we hit the causal body. And this is the reincarnating ego. And then, so it's going to hold the memory of the past lives. So if you're getting impressions from something, prior to this birth, you're probably bumping into the causal body. And then as you go up, you get to the buddhi and the atma. Okay. And they work so close together that it's hard to separate them. But if you think of the Buddhic body, you could think of the Buddha himself. Like, what did he obtain? It's like this universal kind of brotherhood aspect of ourselves that interconnects us to everything else. And then the Atma is sort of the I am. It's really hard to explain because it's more of just a knowing of I am, right? And then as we go back down, okay, spirit starts to veil itself into these different bodies. Because we couldn't possibly understand the Atma, so it veils itself in Buddhi, and then Buddhi will veil itself into that higher mind, and then which is associated with like the higher self. So then the higher self is veiling itself in the lower mind, and then so it's like as we go up and clear some of these veils, we are able to access our whole self. But it can take certain initiations or practices to get to that point, and these initiations don't have to come from religion or anything like that. Like mine was from trauma and hardships and things like that. But there will be certain things in our lives that open us up to those higher parts of ourselves, to starting to understand and connecting with them. So,
Right.
yeah.
Like meditation did that for me, or spiritual hypnosis. I've done a lot of that with Rami. Or like I have a ley line in my house, right? And I usually sit in meditation in the vortex. And so like I'm in the ley line now. It goes through this wall and to the vortex. But that's what I attribute to that extra higher energy that
Right.
started my journey into the spiritual world, I guess you could say, above what I knew in my mind or my heart, right? A different level.
Yeah. And I've had many people go into the records just through meditation and intention alone. And when they're doing Reiki on people or they're healing, they're actually accessing the records. So you can do it with a prayer and intentionally go in. But if you are in that peaceful state and you have questions and you start to get answers, you're probably in your Akashic records. So, and they're interconnected with the collective records, so you can pull information pretty easily in that space, especially if you have intention to do so. So,
Mm-hmm. So, so like you're saying that's, at least I'm thinking that you're saying, so that when we're in meditation and or not necessarily sitting still, but just in a mindset of meditation, and you're asking of the spirit and you're receiving answers, that comes from the what part
your
again?
Akashic records,
The Akashic records.
right?
That is that one of the 7 layers?
So the records exist in every plane and dimension,
Okay.
and they are, I kind of associate them with prana, is how I see them, as like a web that just interpenetrates everything. And they are collecting all of the sensations, the data, the memories, and they store it into like a cloud, like the iCloud. Every person, every planet, every sphere has their own Akashic records. And when you're in the astral plane, you can hit the Akashic records that exist there, but there's more beyond that. But you can go into the collective records from the astral plane. And sometimes a lot of people do it by accident. I only go into the records with the intention. I say the prayer just to make sure that that's definitely what I'm getting, and that it helps validate that I'm not just making up whatever's coming through. But
Right.
in my experiment, so I had this woman and I did an astrology reading with her, and she wanted to do the records, but it had been 4 hours, and I was like, okay, just go ahead and write your question out. I'll go into the records in the morning and I will tell you what they say. But I couldn't do it right then because I was just so mentally drained. So she wrote her question down, and then she went home and meditated and asked that question herself. And she didn't tell me that. So I go into the records the next day, hadn't talked to her yet, and I sent her what the records said. They basically told her that her ailment was like an environmental toxin. They gave her a remedy suggestion and told her not to worry about it and that it would clear up on its own. And when I told her that, she said, I went home and meditated last night and I received that it was an environmental toxin. And the homeopathic remedy suggested was exactly the same one. And she has never studied homeopathy in her life at this point. So I was like, that's very interesting, because you didn't, say the record prayer or anything like that. She just set the intention. She had an open heart and, a pure question about herself. And she received the exact same answer that I received by going into her Akashic records. So this is what made me start to really think that, the prayer is helpful just to kind of make us feel confident and to give us the intention and set the sacred space. But I think that all of us are tuning into our Akashic records, and all of us are receiving guidance from our loved ones and our spirit guides and our teachers all the time. So it's hard for people to believe that they're not making it up. And so when we validate these experiences for each other, it's like, oh, okay, well, this really is, there must be something to it if everyone's channeling the same thing.
So do you think because I haven't, I haven't studied. I've been so busy since being on my own inner healing journey, and trying to understand just what I'm doing, and more than understanding, just fully experiencing what I'm experiencing, I guess, is more of what it is. And going where I'm led, learning to follow, right? Um, so is the Akashic record, do you think, what um, people refer to as God? I mean, and you're saying in receiving messages? I mean, like, I receive messages directly, and I hope you don't take, I'm not defensive at all. And I'm just real curious, right? Because a lot of these are big words, right? If people aren't not interested, but haven't done studying, so much like
Mhm.
you have, then each of these words come with a whole different set of other words to explain what it is, right? And so I'm just asking, um, just to know, right? So what? So do you think that is God that people are? It's another word that's used, or is God something bigger, something different? Say, like when I'm sitting in meditation, then often I ground my mind in the deep source energy way under the earth. I
Uh-huh.
see it as purple and flowing, right? That's how it comes to me. But that's like the concentrated um, source, or the concentration of where I feel God's strongest, I guess, in my
Mhm.
mind, in meditation, in receiving messages, right? That's where I
Mhm.
put my mind. And so, and I receive those messages. So is that what other people would refer to as the records?
So in Barbara Hanklow's work, she talks about the different dimensions, and she will say, oh, well, the Akashic records can be found in the 4th dimension, which is the astral plane, but it's also accessible through the iron core crystal center of the earth. So when you go into the earth and you hit that middle point, you are also going to be bumping in to the Akashic records. And I would actually suggest that that's probably a more grounded method, because when we access the records through the astral plane, there are more veils of illusion that can come forward. And so I do think that if, you know, you're in your astral body and you're traveling, you're getting answers and things like that, that it probably is you bumping into the records. But if you want really clear, coherent information, I would suggest that coming in from that grounded place, from the center of the earth, is probably going to feel more supportive and flowy. So as far as the records being like connected to God, I think of God as the all. So everything that exists is a part of God. So when we're in the records are made up of our masters, teachers, loved ones, and the record keepers, which keep it safe. So I wouldn't consider all those to be God, but they're aspects of God, right? So they're going to carry certain information. But basically what's happening is you go in with a question and there's a resonance to that question. And you go into the records and your master teacher's loved ones, whichever one is has the information that matches that, will come to you. So if you're asking a question about, you know, your childhood, and you're having pain and you're like, I need some explanation, it might be your great-great-grandmother that comes through. But if you have something specific, it might be a teacher, and that teacher might be, I don't know, it could be karma, it could be temperance, it could, you know, it could be all sorts of things. So that would be more specific to, it just depends on your question, and like who would benefit by giving you the answer is who's going to show up.
That your answer is so interesting to me. I see and hear ancestors, right? And so, but I'm seeing and hearing them different than what I meant, like the voice, the resonance that I feel in the deep energy is different than the ancestors. They come and go at different times. Sometimes it's just their mind that comes, right? Sometimes it's physically. And so, but I really understand what you're saying about that resonance, because that's how I explain how I hear the ancestors. It's like they're a vibration, their thoughts are a vibration, my thoughts are a vibration, and their field picks up my vibration, and their mind interprets it into what they understand, and I receive that back in what my mind can understand in English.
Right. And it's similar. A lot of people describe it as a library, you know, going to the records is a great library. And so when you go to the library, you have something on your mind. You're like, well, I really want to learn more about this topic. And you might have some authors in mind that you prefer or that you're aware of, but there might be some authors that you've never heard of that wrote on the same topic. So you go to the library and you're on a quest and you have a question, and certain books are going to stand out to you. And you'll select them, and then you open them, and now this has all the resources associated with that particular question. So I do like the analogy of the records as a library. And the first time I ever went into them, intentionally, I was in a very, very giant library. And I did this with my eyes closed. When I do my readings, my eyes stay open and I'm very present. But for this one, my eyes were closed in meditation. So I go in and I see the library, and there's a book and a little feather pen, and I go up to the book, and I'm just told, like, write your question. Like, it's like claircognizant. I just know, okay, I'm supposed to write something. So I write the question in the book, and the answer also appears underneath my question. So this is very interesting, because now when I work with the records, I do a lot of writing. Like I'll literally say, hello, records, write the question out. And then I'll also write the answer, but it was interesting this first time because I was like, no, I had no clue what was going to happen. But it was quite beautiful to be in this space, just of all this knowledge. But there's love here. There's like, it's also this experiential experience when we're in the records. It's not information mining, and it's not never useless information. It's always full of love, and it matches exactly what you need to hear in that moment. It's not always what you want to hear. Right. But just being in the Akashic records is a healing experience, and the information holds a healing energy with it. And it's interesting because I still have flashbacks from my very first Akashic reading, and I'm like, oh wow, I'm still receiving guidance from that very first reading that shows up in my living world all the time, where I'm like connecting dots. So sometimes they will give you an answer, but it's such a big answer, and you don't realize it at the time, that it's like as you grow into integrating that answer, and it becomes this beautiful experience of seeing these synchronicities out in your world, and you're just like, oh, this is what they were talking about. But at the time when you got the answer, you were like, yeah, that makes sense, but a lot of times the answers kind of become more understandable as we have certain experiences that make even more sense along our path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then to go back, each of the other, starting with the etheric double, or I guess you've kind of explained a little more of that, but the others then, beside just the names of them, could you give like a little easy to visualize or something explanation of them?
Okay. So I will talk a little bit more about the astral body, because our focus was etheric and astral bodies. So the etheric double has its chakra system, and it's really corresponds to the basic one that we know. It might look a little different than some of the general pictures that you see, but it basically corresponds to the same thing. The astral body has its own set of chakras, which aren't necessarily active in a person. They have to be activated over time. They can range between 2 to 6 inches, but as you take certain initiations, the astral aura can grow and grow and grow. So it's said that the Buddha had an aura of 3 miles. And it's talking about his astral aura, not his etheric. So as we grow our spiritual life, our field becomes more encompassing. And then the people that enter our field, can receive benefits. You think of the stories of like Jesus, people are just like touching his robe and they're experiencing healing. As his field was so large, and a lot of these avatar beings had a very large astral body. So just walking through a town, people could receive benefits of their healing. But the big difference between the astral body and the etheric body is that the astral body is more associated with our feelings and our emotions, our desires, and our passions. So passion kind of gets a bad rap, but it's actually a more neutral term, and you decide how to work those passions into your reality. You can use that energy for good, or it can, consume you, and it can bring you into a lower state. But the astral and the etheric bodies are really playing on each other. And I became very aware of this as I'm studying homeopathy. So we are taking care of that etheric body and the physical body. But when you have a consult, they ask you all sorts of emotional questions like, and what are your dreams like? This is also the body that we go into when we are dreaming in the astral plane. And it was like, well, why does this matter? Okay, but when we're healing, we have to heal at all of these levels, mentally, physically, and spiritually. And so the astral body is more associated with these feelings. And because it's connected to the mental body, they play off each other. So when we have thoughts, okay, we create these things called thought forms. And depending on how deep the thought is or how consistent the thought is, or how mindful it is, the thought form might be more defined, or it might just be a flickering thought, right? Sometimes our thoughts come and go very quickly. So the astral aura, unlike the etheric aura, which stays pretty consistently a color, like if you have your aura picture, it's not going to just be flickering like a light show. It's usually some blue here, some green there. If you do meditation, you might bring in some purple. It doesn't change as rapidly as the astral aura, which is every sensation you have, every feeling. You know, you could be thinking about your dog and then think about, you know, this tragic thing from your childhood. And so this astral aura has all of these fleeting feelings and thoughts associated with it. Now, if you hold one of those feelings or thoughts long enough, it will bleed over into the etheric aura and start and show up in that field. But anyways, you know, feelings are pretty fleeting a lot of times. So you have a moment to be like, oh, I don't want to create a thought form out of this feeling. So I'm going to let it fade. But if you ruminate on something, you basically give it life and create a thought form. And now this thought form, it exists in the astral plane. And maybe it exists for a couple moments or 2 weeks or a year. It depends on how much you continue to give it life. But the astral body is where we're creating the thought forms from. And when we're in the astral plane, you can see other people's thought forms. You're interacting with them, and they kind of create their own. They're like their own being. Like you created them, and then they have life, and they just exist. And so yeah, that's a part that's associated with the astral body. So yeah, all the feelings that we have are going to be reflected in the astral body, and the astral plane is a complete mirror of the physical plane. So everything that exists here has its astral counterpart. If an item is damaged, it's also damaged in its astral form. And so these worlds are very, very interconnected. So interpenetration coming up again. It's important to take care of our physical body. It's important to be mindful of our astral body. It's important to be mindful of our feelings and our thoughts, because they can trickle down and affect our health. And so I think when we're doing like the biofield and all this, and we're healing through some of those emotional things, it makes sense that the physical body would also heal. And sometimes it's quite rapid. You know, sometimes like with homeopathy, I mean, someone might have a tumor and it's like they go back 2 days later, they don't have it. And it's just like the thing needed to be cleared. And as soon as it was cleared, the body responded. Some things might take longer depending on how long the issue has been occurring. And so the healing might take a little bit longer and some more repetition and going into what are my emotions around this? How is my body feeling? How are these all interconnected? So I feel like when we bring the astral body into our healing journey and we allow our feelings a place within the healing, then it becomes more of a whole process. So moving up a little bit, if we go into the mind, so we have it's called the manas in the theosophical literature. We have the lower and the higher mind, and they kind of have a bridge. A lot of people stay in the lower mind. This is the analytical mind. It's like the science and the reified information that is very concrete and literal. And most people stay underneath that. They're not wanting to connect to their higher self. And so, yeah, our world is basically ran on analytical information. But if you go a little bit higher into the higher manas and tap into your causal body, so this acts as a bridge to your higher self. And these parts of you are immortal. And so they hold the whole story of yourself, and then the lineage of humanity and everything on our planet becomes that information becomes more apparent to us, because as we continue to go up, like I was saying with the Buddhic body is like kind of the universal brotherhood. So this is going to connect you and your life. It's going to show you how it interconnects with everybody else. So when we're in that Buddhic space, we're very aware of how the role that we play and how we affect others. And so when we're in that body, it's kind of more of a transpersonal experience, even though it is still us, of what can I do, right, to assist? How can I provide assistance for my brothers and sisters. And then as we go even higher into the Atmic body, we step into just the I am, the soul, and what, you know, a lot of people would call like the monad. So we all have we're like our own little monad, and then we make up the greater monad, which a lot of people might call the all or God or whatever. But this is where the part contains the whole, keeps coming back up, or as above, so below.
Right.
I think sometimes we think we're unimportant because we're humans, because we have a physical body, but as we evolve and make changes and grow, we actually help the collective grow.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
And it matters, you know, it really matters. And, you know, we have these physical bodies, everyone's wanting to transcend the body. And I'm like, how about you, make your body home? Like, how about you be in your body, this gift from God that you will transcend soon enough. How about
that was
being
good.
in the body?
Yeah.
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 Because
Absolutely.
you can't make changes that you can make in the physical world. Like, so if you're just in spirit, you're not able to be in material form, you know? So it's a gift to be here. We can work on our karmas here in ways that we can't when we don't have a body. We can interact with each other. We can, you know, do all of this service to humanity. We can really help lift, you know, some of the collective karma while we're here in the body. And so it's a gift to have a body. And I wish for everyone to be able to be more present and loving within their bodies, and know that being a human is a beautiful thing, even though it comes with some hardships and challenges. But I do think we did decide at some point to incarnate into this body.
Absolutely.
So.
We have the choice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The I lost my train of thought. But yes, about how we can affect the whole. I feel that in my work greatly, because it's like, if a lot of times that when we clear what's in the individual, then it also, so much is ancestral. It's inherited because we're made of them. And so then it clears it in the ancestors, and they're happier, their voltage goes up. I mean, I feel that very strongly, and can see the difference in their voltage. And then beyond that, it's the universe that grows, right? It's just big. I mean, we can do a lot as individuals. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And Carl and Remy know I have been, not even a year yet, but listening to some of the Abraham Hicks videos and stuff. And so what you're saying really goes right along with that. But I really like how they describe it as we came here to create, and that those that don't have the physical body aren't able to have that experience. So this is a gift. And so I've really, been focusing myself on being appreciative of all the things I can see, I can touch. I've birthed 3 children, I can swim in a ocean. I can, all these things that we can do. So thank you for, talking about that too. That was beautiful.
Yeah. And the astral plane is a beautiful place to imagine and dream up creations. I go into the astral plane regularly to try to form a thought of what do I want to bring into materialization. And when I'm there, it's it's more malleable. Okay. So I can kind of take the clay and play around, what do I want to create? And a lot of the paintings that I do are actually from visions or vision quests or images that I receive or create from that astral plane. And when we're making art, we're really tuning into our feelings. So that's going to connect us right to the astral body. And so I'm basically taking my feelings and putting them on a canvas. And so I think when we're tuned into that astral body a little bit more, that creativity is just, it's so invigorating to be in that space. And as we really start to open up the astral centers, we start to also tap into some of the clairs clairaudience, clairvoyance, claircognizance, and things like that. And we're able to have more of these downloads and more of a direct link to our higher self, because the astral plane acts like a bridge, right, to that higher mental plane. And so I think it's been helpful to, as a creator, to be able to be tapped into my other bodies and very aware of the creativity that can come forth from some of these higher planes.
Yeah. Well, the subject is so interesting.
I feel like I should have been taking notes the whole time, Carla and Remy. She's got so much knowledge.
I know, it's
Thank you,
awesome.
Astro.
You
Yeah.
have studied and studied, yes.
Yeah. So cool.
I have like 3 hours worth of podcasts on this, the human constitution, and then I have another one just on the astral plane and like the beings and the phenomena and all of the things. So I definitely did a deep dive into this. And I've read this book on the Etheric Double 3 times. Every time I read it, I'm like, oh my God, I totally didn't grasp that the first time. So, if people are listening and they're like, what the heck is she talking about? Well, just know that I was the same way. And some of the concepts might be more foreign, but as you sit with them and start to kind of have these experiences, like trying to tune into your, vitality and your etheric double, it's really good to tap into that, because we can do a lot of healing from that space. Even just connecting the etheric to the mental body. So if you have a diseased part of your body or you're sick, you can visualize that part of yourself and go into that space, and then also visualize what would it look like as a healthy organ. What would that look like in an optimal state of vitality? And it actually can send healing to the space. And sometimes it can be quite rapid. I watched this video from some Greg Braden documentary or something. This woman had an incurable tumor. They tried everything. There was no other options. So they had an ultrasound machine on. It was like a stomach tumor or something. And everyone in the room was just saying it's already healed. But in their language, it was a different language. They just kept repeating the mantra, it's already healed. And they're like visualizing her in her healthiest state. And you can look at the screen, right, during this live action thing, and the tumor starts to shrink. This is an incurable. They said there's no possible way that she was going to survive like a couple weeks. And I'm literally watching this tumor shrink. And so I speak up about it, and I want to study it because I think it's really important, and it's a gift to be able to have this kind of authority over our bodies, to say, oh, I can move my vital energy just based on my own will and thoughts. I am a self-regulating organism. And when I work out the kinks in my vital force, then I can maintain a state of wellness. So when I started studying homeopathy, I got even more passionate about it, because I'm like, this information needs to be shared, because there's so many incurable diseases. So when I started working with a homeopath, it was, not chronic to some people, but I had some autoimmune stuff. I had dry eyes, which was preventing me from being able to read, paint, or drive. And the doctor told me it was incurable. So I started working with a homeopath, and I no longer had dry eyes in just a couple weeks. My autoimmune system's completely gone. No longer have the rheumatoid arthritis, no longer have joint pains. And what are these remedies doing? All they're doing is working on the derangements in the vital force. Okay, it's similar to Reiki. I think it might be just a little bit more potent, and it's like more affordable, because you get the remedy, you can just redose. You continue to, like if your symptoms start to reappear, you just introduce that remedy again. And this is energy medicine. And I do think that energy medicine is the medicine of the future. It doesn't have the side effects. It's not going to give you, internal bleeding and heart attacks and all the side effects. And
Yeah,
I don't know, I guess, it's that medical system where I'm like, as I got older, I'm like, this is causing more harm than good. And so part of my podcast, we talk about metaphysics and spiritualism and all of these things, but holistic health is like a really big passion of mine too. And really caring for our bodies in a way that also cares for these other parts of ourselves, the whole human constitution at once, not sacrificing one for the other, not taking some medicine for the kidney that's going to cause your heart to deteriorate, but loving all of us and taking care of the whole person. And I do think that that's where the deepest healing occurs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Interesting. Well, and to go back, combining all these things, right, to as you were talking, to heal our physical body. Often when I'm working on a specific body part, say with the tuning forks, it's like in my mind, I get this vision of one of the sacred spirals, right? Or the
Uh-huh.
DNA spiral that you see. And it's just going and going and going and going. And then it hits the whatever deepest spot that needs the clearing, where it has to release there first. And it hits there and I can feel it there and it
Mm-hmm.
releases. But the other thing is like breath work can heal too. Say, breathing in, you don't just breathe in through your nose. I mean, you can hold that intention, right? Of breathing in through your fingers and breathing all the way up your arm to your heart, and in and out that way, and up and down your central channel to really get your energy flowing, right? And bring that healing again, because it's the stuck energy
Right.
that causes the disease and illness and things.
Right. Right. And the prana, I mean, it's once you know about it, once you know that you have this power and you can do breath work and you can visualize and you can work with certain sounds, even instruments. I watched this thing on Gaia about, I think it was called The Egg, and they put this person in, and like breast cancer, like the sound for breast cancer is like the violin, and so they just hit you with violin, the frequency of the violin, and it actually helps support the healing. And so the resonances, it's like there's so many things that hold these. There's correspondences everywhere, music, color, vibration, words, and so it's like there's
Yeah,
all sorts of healing. Like God gave us all the plants, even, God gave
everything.
us
Yeah.
all of this. So it's like, yes, you'll face these challenges, but you also have all of the remedies at your fingertips.
Yes.
And it's so beautiful to be able to discover that. And it makes me feel even more like there's just this purpose to it all, and that we're never just like left here, on earth without any help. It's like, well, you might have to study a little bit, or you might have to meet the person that helps you find the thing. But at some point, you can work through some of these issues on earth, and you're not alone. You have a lot of guides and allies, and even if it's a tree or a plant, these things can work with us as well. Or crystals, they hold resonance. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Oh, awesome. Awesome topic and things. We're probably getting close to the end of our usual time we have. And so, Astral, is there anything thought you want to leave with us? Any other specific point, to go into, or explanation or anything?
um I suppose I might leave people with just kind of inspiring them to recognize their own power, and to really believe that they can make changes. There might be many steps that they have to make, but they have this authority to change their reality. They don't have to be stagnant or stuck in one particular space. And they have the power to heal and make all sorts of beautiful changes in their life. So
Absolutely.
yeah, we are very powerful beings, and we
We
should remember
are.
that.
Ah, beautiful. Yeah. Ah, that just feels good just to say, doesn't it? And to say it and hear it.
Yeah.
Um, so very nice. And again, Astral, would you tell people how they can contact you? And of course, it'll be in the description below too.
Okay, so
And
if you want to just follow me and keep up with my podcasts and art and things like that, I have an Instagram page at Astral Meadows. I also have a Facebook page for the podcast, the Astral Hour. On YouTube, I'm Astral Meadow 369. You can find all of our podcast episodes on there. And sometimes I post random videos or teach you how to embroider or something random like that. And you can also book readings, or if you want to be on my podcast or just connect with me, you can go to my website, astralmeadow.com.
Beautiful. And I just thought, do you sell your artwork too? I mean,
I
you
do.
you do the readings and things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do sell it. I mostly post it on my Facebook at Astral Creations, which I guess I should plug that in too. I do post pictures on Instagram, and if you see a painting that I've done that you like, you can just message me and we can work out prices. I kind of just paint them, and then randomly I'll do an art drop and sell 10 of them at a time. And I do sometimes take commissions depending on how busy my schedule is. So yeah, but a lot of my art is very spiritual. I paint things that I see in my records, or I do a lot of deities, like Shiva, or I might do sacred symbols or whatever. So this spiritual concepts kind of pour into my art as well.
Very cool. And I just had another question that had come to me earlier that I just now remembered. Just having the word astral, both in your name, but also in the astral plane, and in astrology, right? Which you do astrology. I've been learning a lot about astrology this year, and how those energies are meant to be so helpful in interacting, that we can use those in making changes in our lives and having a better life here. And so how do you see the energies of the stars and wandering stars? I call them wandering stars instead of planets, and of course the sun and moon. But how do you see those, beside increasing our life force energy, in being a part of that astral plane, or the other layers?
Yeah, as the planets, as we evolve, the planets are evolving, and as the planets are evolving, we're evolving, and we're actually in harmonious relationship with the planets at all times, and they do start to trickle down through the spheres and eventually reach us in the material plane. And the way their energy materializes might look different to each individual person based on their natal chart and which house, which is the area of their life that a particular planet or transit is happening in. So it becomes really individual, which is why some of the horoscopes, people read them, I'm like, well, anyone might think that. But if you attribute it, well, where is this planet happening in my life? Like, where is this happening in my physical life? Maybe it's in your house of relationships. So that's going to look a lot different than if it's happening in somebody's house of finances and material substance. They're moving, and this is where the transits, if you put the transits on top of your natal chart, you can see how these are activating your natal chart and where it's going to really bring a lot of life into the individual aspect of how it's affecting you on a personal level. In esoteric astrology, Mars rules the astral body. So we have an even deeper level here, which I'm not going to blow everyone's mind with because I'm still integrating it myself. But it becomes less about the personality in the material plane and more about our spiritual journey and spiritual plane. So I changed my name to Astral Meadow before I started studying esoteric astrology. But then I discovered I have Mars conjunct my ascendant, and it's very interesting since Mars rules the astral body, and the ascendant is like the moment you take your first breath, it's like you're the self, right? And then also how people see you. So it's funny, I changed my name to Astral and then discover that Mars, is conjunct my ascendant. So it made even more sense that it was the appropriate name. And I spent years meditating before I officially chose to change my name to that. But the planets, just like all these other things, there's correspondences associated with them. And once you learn the correspondences, you start seeing the synchronicities everywhere of like, oh, well, of course, this makes sense. So it takes a little bit to learn astrology because it is kind of its own language. But once you integrate the basics, it really comes to life. The myths that you've just heard your whole life take on a whole new meaning. And you can see, oh, well, I might be playing this myth out in my life right now. Sometimes you might embody the wounded healer. You might have a Chiron transit that's going on, and you might actually be living out that myth for that moment in time. And then it might change depending on which transits are activating your chart in which ways. So astrology is a living language, and there's all these different ways to look at it. I tell people all of the different types of readings are just as valid. And if you think about it, if I'm sitting here and I have 5 different photographers taking the same picture of me from 5 different angles, I might look a little different, but it's still me. It's just from a different perspective. And so there's something, you can't reify astrology into this concrete thing. It's an experience, and it's alive. And like the way that one person interpret it, I can't say the word. They might interpret it differently, but their interpretation is also valid. And so it's kind of just being open and saying, okay, I'm going to hear what this person has to say and try to find the correspondences in your life with it. So, yeah, it's a really beautiful art form that I love learning and exploring and helping other people navigate to.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you. And we talked about having you come back on to talk more about the homeopathy part, right?
Yes. So I will be officially able to take acute cases at the end of the year. So I'll be fully done with my first year of studies, and then I'll go on to study chronic. But I think maybe at that end of the year, I will feel more credible to teach that. But I would absolutely love to come on, because I do think similar to astrology, there's just a little bit of basics that come with it, but it starts to really make sense. So if anyone's interested in exploring that, there are books like there's one called Homeopathy Basics by Priscilla Meadows, and it just goes over the general things to know. And it has taken me a couple years to master how to match remedy to symptoms. But, over time, we can actually start prescribing, especially for acute things, on our own. And so it's very empowering to be able to, I haven't needed to go to a doctor in a really long time. I take care of my entire family. And so I told myself, studying this, even if I never take a client, it'll be awesome just to not have to go to the doctor for all these little things like bee stings and colds and, stomach issues and things like that. I treat them all at home. And it's a beautiful form of medicine. So, yeah.
It is. Yeah. I do herbal medicines.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we haven't been to doctors for, I don't know, 15 years.
Yeah.
It's more. So yeah,
Yeah.
awesome. Very cool. Thank you so much, Astral, for joining us, and we'll close for today. And thank you everyone for watching. We appreciate your being here and learning with us. So we'll catch you next week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.